Pastor Kent Hovind, are you ready to debate Lawrence Krauss?
I am indeed.
Okay. In an article, he responds to a question that one of the values, someone proposes a question, is that one of the values of science is to make us uncomfortable. And this is his answer. I don't mean that science isn't spiritually uplifting. I do think it is. But for the very antithetical reasons to religion, I guess, is the fact that it causes us to feel less comfortable.
I don't understand what he's saying there. Is science, the word science simply means knowledge. I guess in a broader sense, it's the knowledge mankind has accumulated over the centuries based on observation, experimentation, and testing. I love science. I taught physical science, earth science, and biology for 15 years, and I've taught and traveled and lectured on the topic over quite a bit of the world for the last 25 years. I don't know of any scientific evidence from any field that contradicts the Bible as being literally true and scientifically accurate. God made the world. So, as far as spiritually uplifting, everything I know about science, I'm spiritually uplifted. I'm encouraged. I think, wow, what a mighty God we serve. Look how he did this. I guess it'd be like studying an engine or a race car or something and saying, wow, look how smart this designer was. Look what he did, how he designed this or whatever. You can study a race car and the engine and the transmission and the drivetrain and give glory to the designer. Say, whoa, this guy was smart. Look what he thought of here. But to study the race car and then conclude nobody made it would be stupid. And I think a lot of scientists are looking for some way to explain the world without a designer. They see the design, they talk about the design, it's pretty obvious, but they've already decided part of the rules are that you can't mention a designer. To me, that's dumb. That's like studying a race car, saying, okay, we're going to study how this thing works, but we know it happened by chance. You cannot say somebody designed it. That's a dumb way to start your discussion. Why not say, let's study this race car, and let's say, why did they design it this way, instead of how did it happen by chance? So I think scientists, they shot themselves in the foot, some of them, by saying, okay, we have to study science, but we cannot mention a designer. Well, then you've eliminated the only obvious option for common sense at the beginning of your discussion, and you're going to be handicapped from now on. I think people who believe there's a designer who created the world, and they study science from that perspective, are light years ahead of those who start with the assumption there is no designer. And every branch of science for the last 400 years, Isaac Newton, etc., all the great scientists of the past, they were creationists. They were trying to figure out why he designed it the way he did, not trying to eliminate the designer. Gee whiz, it'd be silly. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So he goes on to say that science, not religion, science should provoke us to try and understand what we can do and what meaning we can make in the universe. So, learning that the universe isn't made for us, or there's no evidence that it is profoundly inspiring and is profoundly inspiring.
The universe is not made for us. Why would he think such a thing? If I find a pair of shoes and they fit me just fine, I would have to say, wow, somebody knew my size and they made this for me. When I find an atmosphere that is designed perfectly, it has nearly 80% nitrogen, otherwise we'd have forest fires go crazy all over the place. This nitrogen is an inert gas that dilutes down the other gases, oxygen especially, so it can't burn the world down. I think it's designed, it's amazingly designed for humans to live here. And it's like, wow, somebody thought of everything. You're right, gravitational pull on the planet. What if gravity was stronger? We couldn't hardly move. So there are just 1,000 things, and probably millions of things, that are designed perfectly for human life and for other animal life. And I would say, wow, what a mighty God we serve. To me, as I study science, and I love science, as I study any branch of science, it just drives me to my knees saying, wow, God, you are so smart. What is wrong with that? Are they that determined to not give God the glory for what He made? Well, okay, they can do whatever they want, of course. We'll see how that works out Judgment Day. I think the universe is clearly designed for man and for us to look up and say, wow, what a mighty God we serve. Mm-hmm. I mean, every aspect of science, from light and magnetism and digestion and plant growth and animal life, and it's just amazing to watch. I love studying. I can't think of any branch of science that supports the evolution theory at all. It all supports the idea there's a creator, a really, really smart creator, who fortunately loves us and is willing to forgive us when we mess up. Okay?
Okay. People are. So there was a question about his background and how he was raised. His mother wanted him or his brother to be a lawyer or a doctor. His brother ended up becoming a lawyer, and therefore he was supposed to be a doctor. Well, his mother told this Krauss gentleman that doctors were scientists, but he says that as he was growing up, he learned that doctors were not scientists, and so he got hooked on science.
Well, I would have to strongly disagree. The word science means knowledge. So a scientist is, in my book, and I think in any dictionary, is a person who studies science. They study the body of knowledge that mankind has accumulated over the centuries. We have a great deal of knowledge about how trees grow, and that's called the science of botany, or probably horticulture, or plant growth, or things like that. There's a whole science called earth science, where we study different features of the earth and the minerals and the hardness, the Mohs hardness scale, and what minerals do what and what they're useful for. So no, a doctor certainly is a scientist. They study the body, the human body. A veterinarian would be a scientist. They would study different animals and how they're put together, their anatomy and their function, physiology. Why would anybody say a doctor is not a scientist? That's a new one to me. I've never heard anybody make that statement, and I would strongly disagree. I think every medical doctor is a scientist in the sense that they study the body of knowledge that has been accumulated about the human body. But whether what they've learned is correct or not is another subject for discussion, because through the centuries, doctors have learned things that are simply not true. Like George Washington's doctors were taught the doctrine of humors, that the heart produces the blood and it flows out and the body uses it up. And they didn't realize the circulatory system because they couldn't see capillaries. And so they thought if you're sick, you have bad blood, so take out your blood and you'll get better. And they bled George Washington, I believe, 3 times, and he died. But they were certainly scientists who happened to believe something that was wrong. Just like today, we have a lot of scientists who happen to believe something that's wrong. They believe the dumb evolution religion, which is not true. But no, I disagree. Doctors are scientists, at least by my definition. I think it's pretty common sense.
Yep. Yep. Okay. The reason he says the reason people do science is not to save the world. It's because it's fun. That's the only reason that people do science. Generally, you're not going to work 20 years on a given subject unless you enjoy it. And I think that we don't explain that enough.
I don't understand the phrase, do science. People do science. That seems to me to be a contradiction of terms. Science is knowledge. Look it up. It's from the Greek or Latin word seer, to know. What do we know? What do we know about rocks? What do we know about weather? What do we know about, human body? There's all kinds of branches of science, probably hundreds of them. What do we know? How do you do knowledge? Maybe he means how do we use it? But I've heard that before, and I said, what on earth do you mean? Don't do science. Come on. Explain that to me. I agree. Studying science and learning about things is fun. Now, that I would agree with, and I have had a blast all of my life learning things. My mom was a kindergarten teacher. My dad was an electrical engineer. They started us off from birth teaching us things, and we enjoyed learning. We build things and tear things apart. And, I can build a house. I can explain in great detail how a car works, internal combustion engine, the valve lash, and the duration and timing, and the bore and the stroke, and the different thermal expansion of different metals. And I think I could hold my own in a conversation on a wide range.
This call is from the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office.
On a wide range of science topics, from botany to biology to earth science to astronomy, but science, you don't do science. You study science. You study knowledge. What has man learned? And maybe some of the things mankind thinks they have learned are wrong and need to be re-examined. Of course, then you have to look at it. There's different cultures. One culture might think something is science, something is meaning knowledge. They think, oh, the evidence shows this. And another culture might think, oh, no, the evidence shows this. And you have to disagree and get together. And in theory, you're supposed to be able to do experiments and demonstrate your point, prove your point. So, yeah, I don't understand what he means to do science, but I do agree science is fun. And I can't wait to have a science center again where we have activities. And the kids had a blast at my Dinosaur Adventureland. Yeah. And once I win this case and the government pays me the damages they've done, I'm going to build me a huge Dinosaur Adventureland. And we're going to have more fun with science than you can imagine. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. To me, he says, to me, the most exciting thing about science is the ideas. Science has produced the most interesting ideas that humans have ever come up with. Certainly the most interesting.
I agree. I love science, and there are some great ideas. I think science has shown us, and all experiments and observation has shown us that dogs produce dogs. And they've shown us that we can get a real wide range of dogs. I mean, from the big ones, the Great Danes, down to the toy Chihuahuas. But with the science has shown us that there are limits to the size. You're not going to get a dog as big as Texas or a dog as small as a flea. There are limits. And they've shown us that the further we get away from the normal average generic dog, the more problems you start to develop. Hip dysplasia, for instance, or, various things. Most of the dogs that man has created, varieties of dog that man has created through selective breeding, would not survive in the woods. Turn all the Chihuahuas loose into the woods and see how long they last. They come up to the wolf, yep, crunch, it'd be gone, it'd be lunch, it'd be over with. Yeah. So it's true that dogs produce a variety of dogs, but most of the varieties produced by man for whatever reason, either for hunting or to look cute or something, they wouldn't survive in the wild, and they're still a dog. It's a variation. But I agree, it's exciting to see how far these limits go. But to me, a farmer who says, hey, I'm going to see, can I get corn to grow at the 45th latitude? Oh, wow, I can. Okay. Can I get a breed of corn that'll grow at the 48th latitude? I mean, can I keep going up higher and higher? Can I get corn that'll grow in certain climates or with less water or in rocky soil or sandy soil or acid soil? I don't know how many varieties of corn there are. Let's pick a number and say there are 50. Okay. But there's still corn. Yes, you can get a lot of varieties of dogs and varieties of corn and varieties of cats, but that's fun. That's experimentation, and it's cool and it's neat, but it's not evolution. It's a variation within the same kind. Yeah. So maybe we're stretching the limits and see, okay, how far can this kind go? But that's proof of creation, not proof of evolution. I don't see how anybody turns that into evidence for the idea that we all came from a rock. To me, that's dumb.
Yeah.
Okay, go
ahead. This is leading up to, it'll be interesting how this leads up to his background. It's the ideas of science that make it so important for humans because it's part of what makes it's part of what makes humans worth. What? Hold on. It's the ideas of science that make it so important for humans because it's part of what makes being human worth being human.
That's a convoluted statement, but if I understand him correctly, I would agree that science is fun and it's important and we should study different metals and what are the uses of these metals and different rocks and minerals and different uses of water for plants. And so there's plenty of stuff, and it has nothing to do with the evolution theory. You can be a creationist and think God made the world and do everything in the field of science and study these things, and it's important. I agree. We should study what varieties of rice grow best on this climate, and encourage the people in that area to grow this variety of rice because they'll get a better yield for their crop. Sure, I love that stuff. And in Texas, the longhorn cows are the Brahma bulls are heat resistant. So let's bring in some Brahma bulls and let's breed them with a different kind of cow that produces a Brangus. And now you get heat resistance and good beef production. That's all fine, but it's still a cow. So it's certainly limited to the same kind. Science is important for humans. I love it. I taught it 15 years. I encourage people to study science. But I don't see any connection between that and the evolution religion at all. None. Zero. Zero. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. It's far more difficult to conform your imagination to the evidence of reality than to invent your own realities. Case in point, in fact, religion is an example.
Well, yeah, evolution is a religion. That's a classic example of how you have to try to conform what you believe to reality. They're trying desperately to look at the reality of dogs produce dogs. And then they try to make the students believe, see, this proves dogs and bananas are related if you go back 4.72 billion years. Come on. Bananas produce bananas and dogs produce dogs. There are simply no exceptions to that. Everything beyond that is a religion. And if he has a religion that says dogs and bananas are related, that's fine. You can believe that. But don't call it science. So, yeah, I think he needs to look in the mirror on that one. The religion is the evolution part. Okay, next question.
Okay. I like science fiction. I liked science fiction until I discovered that science is much more interesting. The universe continues to surprise us in ways that we would never imagine, which is why I'm a theoretical physicist.
Well, I'm glad he's a theoretical physicist. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but if he's happy, wonderful. But I agree that studying science sometimes offers some great surprises. Like, wow, what about this? You know, that is amazing. I think George Washington Carver, for instance, at Tuskegee University, the black scientist in Alabama, he discovered, I think, 400 or 500 uses of the peanut. He invented gunpowder from peanuts. He made all kinds of amazing things from peanuts. He was a Class A scientist, but he believed in creation. He believed God designed the peanut. And hey, let's find some uses for that. I think there are probably thousands of uses of plants and things God has made that we haven't discovered yet. I don't know when they discovered you can take corn and make gas out of it, but I think that's pretty cool. I think it's probably too expensive. It's cheaper to drill it out of the ground, but still it is interesting. They can make corn into a fuel that you can burn in your car. Yay. What's that have to do with evolution? Nothing. That proves that God designed corn, and it's pretty cool, and we probably don't even know everything about it yet. So I don't see any connection. I think if there's any science fiction, it's the idea that animals can change to a different kind. Evolution is pure science fiction. Evolution above the microevolution level, variations, which certainly happens. But macroevolution, cosmic evolution, organic evolution, they don't happen. They've never been observed. It's a fairy tale for grown-ups is all it is. Okay, next question.
Okay. This is a question he's asked after that. So do other physicists watch Star Trek growing up and then they realize that science is more interesting? What's your answer to that question directed to him?
I don't know. Probably. I think physicists who study physical science, the way matter and energy behave, is a wonderful branch. I taught physical science for 15 years. I think I have probably a better than average grasp of the topic, but I don't know of anything from physical science that would indicate there's not a designer and a creator. So if other people want to watch Star Trek and dream about galaxies, you know, lost in space kind of stuff, that's fine. I think there's zero evidence of any other life outside of this planet other than, you know, angels and demons like the Bible talk about, but there's certainly no evidence of life on any other planets. If they want to believe that, fine. But don't call it science. That's science fiction.
Yep.
So I don't know what other physicists do when they look at the universe. I would think they would say, wow, what a mighty God we serve. To me, that'd be a logical conclusion. When I look at an amazing design, I say, wow, the guy who made this is smart. What is wrong with giving glory to the designer? What on earth is wrong with that? To me, that's common sense 101. But some of these guys are determined not to give God the glory for his creation. I think they need to read Romans chapter 1 and write their name in there, because that talks about them for sure.
Yeah. The discussion of justifying the evil in the Bible, which I think is an interesting discussion, the first night and the second night, talking about his debate, a set of logic that I simply cannot understand, epitomized by the claim that if the universe has an explanation, it must be God, without any justification.
What would a physicist care about justifying evil in the Bible? Isn't he talking about physics and science and gravity and light and magnetism? And there's no morals behind gravity, light, and what is evil? Define what evil is in his mind. He said justify evil in the Bible. What is evil? If evolution is true, is anything evil? How can anything be right or wrong? Explain what you mean. Justify evil. I don't think he could give an answer to that one, but I'd like to hear it if you'd like to try.
Yeah, I hear. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I've never had an evolutionist answer the question. How do you tell right from wrong?
Yeah. Okay. This debate that is going on, it's the focus is on has science buried God, but that's just for the upcoming statements here. You said he's talking about just Christians and creationists in general. You said religion and science are rivals, but that's like saying Bambi and Godzilla are rivals.
I don't believe religion and science are rivals. I think at least the Bible. And you got to be careful. What do you mean by religion? And what do you mean by science? There's all kinds of different religions. But if you take the Bible and science are certainly not rivals. They agree 100%. I'm not aware of anything in the Bible that's scientifically inaccurate, and I'm not aware of any scientific facts that discredit the Bible. If he knows of some, let me know. I think we could give plenty of scientific facts that discredit the evolution religion as it's currently being taught. So all kinds of science backs up the Bible, and I'm not aware of any scientific facts that refute anything in the Bible. So if he's got some, let me know.
Okay. He says, I come here not to bury God, but to praise honesty, full disclosure, and skeptical empirical inquiry, which, alas, are burying God.
Wow, if he thinks that all inquiry that we've done, and all the things we've discovered through observation, which is what really science is about, experimentation, if he thinks that buries God, he is blind. All of the scientific evidence that I'm aware of in the universe supports the idea there must be a designer, a creator. What on earth does he mean? Or I came here not to bury God. Well, in the first place, good luck on that one. I think God is laughing at the scoffers who claim he doesn't exist. But, yeah, you can try all you want. It's like if back to the story again. If you find a painting hanging on a tree, you're walking through the woods, and here's a painting hanging on a tree. And I say, I want you to explain how this painting got here, but let me explain right up front, you cannot use man as your answer. Give me a purely naturalistic explanation. Study the soil, find out what pigments are in the soil, and the roots of the plants absorb that paint and those pigments and put it onto the painting. You're never going to get an answer because I've excluded the only obvious answer at the beginning of the discussion. There's no man. You can't use man. Okay. And these guys want to start and explain everything about the universe without bringing a God into it. Well, that's fine if they want to do that, but I think you're going to have to eventually come back and say, okay, there must have been a designer. Mm-hmm. Now, who is it? And why did he do it this way? That's a different set of arguments, but there must have been a designer. So he's not going to bury God. God is not the least bit worried about what he thinks. God does not care at all what he thinks. Mm-hmm. So,
yep.
And he's probably laughing at the whole thing. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. If he's not laughing, we're laughing. That's for sure.
I think it's hilarious. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Let me interject here as the moderator because I know that some people think this way. What if God actually created the Big Bang? What if, in fact, he created it and in the 6 days by, I guess, fast forwarding the evolution stages, he could. Is it possible and is it biblical to say that God is the one that actually created the Big Bang and evolution in the 6 days, and therefore man?
Well,
Also man. I mean, sorry.
The Big Bang the Big Bang is dumb scientifically. Matter created itself out of nothing and then exploded. Where did the energy come from? Where did the matter come from? Where did space come from? Where did time come from? It doesn't answer any questions at all. It's a purely religious concept, and it's flatly stupid, in my opinion. Why would you blame God for something like that? And then you've got the idea of the Big Bang producing matter and then slowly evolving and life coming to be. Evolution is a theory that requires millions of animals to die. It's a horrible theory. It's struggle, it's death, it's suffering. What kind of a God would create a world like that? I think man's sin has taken God's perfect world and reduced it to a lot of suffering and agony, but that's man's fault, not God's fault. Mm-hmm. No, God created a perfect world, and we messed it up. The evolution religion would have everything, the strongest survive, the struggle for life. That was Charles Darwin's book, The Struggle for Life. Okay, well, that means somebody has to die. The strongest survive, the weaker are killed off for the good of the species. Well, that's Adolf Hitler's thinking. Yep. Let's kill off these inferior species so the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Norwegians, which is me, by the way, the superior race, can take over the world. It's just flat stupid.
Right.
It's flat stupid on its face. No, okay. So if he wants to believe that, that's fine, but religion and science they're not rivals, for heaven's sake. I believe God created the world just like I believe a bunch of people get together and create cars. I worked at General Motors putting trucks together. I saw them go together. I understand pretty well how they work, too. I could explain it if you'd like, down to the drivetrain and the differential slip and all that kind of stuff. I think I have a better than average working knowledge of how cars work. Yeah. But that doesn't mean I would get up and say, nobody made a car. The more I understand about the working of a car, the more I realize the intelligence of the people who design it. And the more I understand about the workings of nature and biology and earth science and weather and all the branches of science and physics, the more I say, wow, what a mighty God we serve. He is so amazing. To me, it drives me to my knees and makes me praise Him. It doesn't hinder my study of science at all. But it drives me to the logical conclusion that the God who made all this is really smart and, fortunately, loving and forgiving. So I don't understand where this guy comes up with the idea that science and religion are rivals. Gee whiz, nothing is further from the truth, in my opinion. I love science, and I love the Bible. I think the Bible is 100% scientifically accurate. If he knows of a mistake, show me. Give me a chance to try to defend it. I'll try. Okay?
He goes on to say, believers in Christ suggest that there's one God, like the God that the people who organize this... Oh, man. Believers in Christ suggests that there's one God, like the God that the people who organize this thing, and is somehow special. But that's just not true. There are lots of gods, and science has buried all of them.
Well, I think by definition, there can't be lots of gods. There can only be one God. It's like there can only be one first place. Okay.
Yeah, right.
There's only one God, just simply by definition. It's silly to say there are lots of gods. And science, how has science buried all of these gods? Where does he come up with this stuff? He's making this up out of his empty head, I would say. No, science supports the idea. Science means knowledge. All the knowledge we've been able to gather indicates there's a designer. Now, who is it? That's a different story. But I think you'd have to say everything we see from science says, wow, there is a designer. Somebody designed the laws. Somebody designed the matter. Somebody designed the molecules, the atomic reactions between these molecules, the covalent bonding. That's an amazing thing that happens. It's just everything from the molecule to the galaxy is designed. What's wrong with that? Why does that bother some people?
Yep.
It doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
It makes me love science and love my Creator.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Okay. Human civilization began by putting purpose, and intelligent purpose, behind gods associated with the sun, the moon, and throughout history, Thor, Poseidon, the god of war, Ammon. And the really important thing is that all of you, or almost all of you, probably are now atheists regarding those gods. Just the only difference is it is just one that we may disagree about.
How does he know such a thing? He's assuming that evolution is true and man came up from the animals to our current status, which is the absolute not true. The opposite is true. So he's starting with an evolutionary assumption to prove his evolutionary assumption. Now, human civilization began with two people who knew and walked and talked with God in the Garden of Eden. And they disobeyed God and fell away from him, and now we are sinful by nature, and some want to serve him and some don't. But no, the idea that human civilization began by putting purpose behind things and making each of the things we see, the sun, the wind, the water, into gods, is dumb. There's no scientific evidence for that at all. He can certainly believe that if he likes, but that's not science. That's his religion. That's his worldview of history.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's not true.
Okay.
And very slanted.
Yeah. Then he says, there have also been thousands of different gods throughout human history: Mars, the god of war, Poseidon, Thor. And the really important thing is that all of you who believed in these pagan gods, or almost all of you, probably are now atheists regarding those gods. Just the only difference is it is just one that we may disagree about.
Well, it's true that down through history, people have tried to make gods out of things that are not gods. But I think that the historical evidence and the just logical conclusion would be there can only be one God by definition. There cannot be multiple gods. And the idea of all these false gods, these Zeus and Thor and things like that, and Mount Olympus and all that stuff, probably came from man's depravity, not from the original creation. So I don't know where he gets this. It's true there have been cultures that have gone off on some crazy tangents and have believed some dumb things. But what does that have to do with the truth? There are cultures today that believe some pretty dumb things, and there are people today that worship the stars and the moon, and there are people who worship the evolution theory, the idea that man can improve and things are getting better. They worship the molecules. But no, you can't have thousands of gods. By definition, you can only have one.
Yep. The fact is that science works has buried the gods of the wind and the sun and the moon. And that's a good thing. In the process, the human condition has improved immensely, and it will continue to improve as science continues to bury the one remaining God.
Of course, that would be the God of the Bible in his twisted thinking, I would suspect. Yeah, I believe he's correct that science, knowledge, increasing man's wisdom has made us realize that the sun, the moon, the stars, etc., are not God. That's a wonderful thing, I agree. Because there have always been people that worship things and call them God, like statues and rocks. But he is not correct that there's one remaining God that science is going to bury. The one remaining God, the true creator of the universe, is the one who created science. He created knowledge. He knows everything. He's ultimate wisdom. So you're really not going to understand science until you know that God. You're not going to bury him. I guarantee whoever made that statement is going to get buried one day. Now that I would guarantee.
Yep.
But he's not going to bury God. Like somebody had a T-shirt that said, God is dead, signed Nietzsche. And then underneath it was crossed out and said, Nietzsche is dead, signed God.
Yeah, that's pretty clever.
Yeah. So, whoever's saying this statement, they're going to get buried one day. And I hope that they go to heaven when they do, if they've trusted Christ and believed in his salvation that he made available. If not, they're going to hell. Plain and simple. And I would warn them, you're going to be dead for an extremely long time. You might want to pack a lunch for that trip. Make sure you're going to the right spot.
Mm-hmm.
No, he's not going to bury God. But I think he's a lousy analogy. It's true. Some of the fault.
This call is from the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office.
Worshiping the trees, the wind, the weather, the sun, the moon should be buried because they're not God. But that does not equate to one more God to bury. He's dreaming. Actually, a nightmare. Okay, next statement.
Yeah. There's a lot we don't know about. There's a lot we don't know about the universe. A lot more than what we didn't know. That's the wonder of science. That's why I'm a scientist. It is intellectually lazy to just stop asking questions and stop looking for physical explanations and just say God did it. That's lazy.
Well, I would agree that I don't do that. I'm a scientist too. I agree there's a lot we don't know about the universe and we should ask questions, and I do. I'm very interested in science. I like to study things. Is it possible there's a connection between magnetism and gravity? The guy who built the Coral Castle down there in South Florida did some interesting experiments, and there are stories of the people in Peru, Machu Picchu, whatever that place is, that moved the giant stones using music. I think there's plenty to learn about science. Is there a connection between gravity, sound, and the Earth? Does the Earth have ley lines, L-E-Y, magnetic field, where there are certain places where you can get energy from the Earth? I don't know. I'm interested in all those things. My belief in God certainly has not caused me to give up on learning things in science. That is stupid.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who believes in God that has done that. So that's a lousy analogy. I think it's the very desire to understand why God did things that causes us to do science. If a UFO landed in your front yard, would you go out there and try to take it apart and analyze it and figure out, wow, I wonder how they powered this craft. I wonder how they did this. I wonder. Sure you would. But you wouldn't say nobody made it. You would say, I wonder how they made it. I wonder why they did it this way. And so when we look at nature, when we look at the earth or the sun or the moon, you'd say, well, I wonder why. You don't have to say there is no God. That's dumb. Yeah, I wonder why. But that's, anyway. So if he thinks that he has to get rid of God to go on wondering and doing science, he's got it totally backwards.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay?
Okay. There is nothing special about Jesus. There's nothing special about Jesus that's any different than any other gods or any other fictional heroes for that matter. First of all, there's no empirical evidence that he was divine. None. Not one iota.
Well, he's welcome to believe that. I think when a guy does the miracles that Jesus did and predicted his own death and resurrection and then accomplished it 3 days later, rose from the dead, and over 500 people saw him after he rose from the dead. Also, I could add my testimony to that. I know what he's done in my life, and I think many hundreds of millions of people could do the same. So if he doesn't think there's anything special about Jesus, just because he hasn't met him yet. I know him personally. I talk to him all the time. So I'm sorry he doesn't know him. That's sad. He's missing out on the greatest joy in the universe, knowing God himself, who became a man and allowed them to kill him and then rose from the dead and provided a way for us to be saved and forgiven. I am forgiven. I'm going to heaven. And it's not because I'm good. Yeah. It's because of what Jesus did. So I'm sorry he feels that way. Now, he can make that bold statement, there's nothing special about Jesus. That doesn't make the statement true. He may really believe it. That still doesn't make it true. He can say it 1,000,000 times and write it down 1,000,000,000,000 times. That still doesn't make it true. Mm-hmm. He's wrong, and he's either stupid or he's lying. But there's something very special about Jesus. It would not be fair for God to judge mankind if God had not gone through what we go through. God became a man and died on the cross. And I think it's a wonderful concept and an amazing way to save back his sinful humanity. Bravo, wonderful job, God. Thank you.
Amen.
Okay, next idiotic statement.
Yeah, I was going to say just that. The myths associated with Jesus are associated with all the other myths in the Bible. The flood myth, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was written well before the Bible. It's all exactly the same. And then he goes on. And then he goes on to comparing, the virgin birth being that of like the Egyptian gods, and then Dionysus, the Greek god of wine, versus Jesus. Drinking the flesh and the blood of the Creator was also an ancient story that was talked about. Osiris. So can you give your answer to him in regards to that?
Well, they love to use that word myth. That's a common practice of the skeptics and scoffers. Oh, that's a Bible myth, the creation myth, the flood myth, the Jesus myth. I think it's crazy, it's dumb, it's retarded, it's stupid. There certainly are plenty of myths. Evolution, if there's ever a myth, it's evolution. The idea that dogs came from a rock and humans came from a rock. That's a myth. That's worse than a myth. That's evil. That's dumb. That's stupid. That's anti-science. Now, he is correct, though, that the Gilgamesh epic might have been written down before the Bible was written down. That may be correct. There are several hundred flood stories. There's a whole bunch of them on creationism.org. You can read these flood stories for yourself. Different cultures around the world have a flood story. And it appears that the Gilgamesh story may have been actually written on paper before God inspired Moses to collect the accounts that others had written. Now, Noah, though, actually wrote the flood account, or Noah's sons. There are 10 authors to the book of Genesis, and you can see where they are by the phrase, these are the generations of. There's one in chapter 2, verse 4, chapter 5, verse 1, chapter 6. There's 10 of them altogether. It's just for the phrase, these are the generations of. That's the person signing off and a new person taking over. So Noah actually wrote part of Genesis, and Noah's sons wrote part, and then Shem wrote part, and then Moses simply collected it all. He was the editor of Genesis. So it's probably true that Gilgamesh wrote his story before Moses edited and published the Genesis account in one book. But that does not mean it was written first. Noah wrote it as it happened, or right after it happened. He was an eyewitness account. The whole book of Genesis is written by 10 eyewitnesses. And that's called the Teledoth, T-E-L-E-D-O-T-H. If you get Henry Morris's Defender Study Bible, which we sell in our ministry, drdino.com, the Defender's Study Bible. It's a King James Bible with Henry Morris's notes. Henry Morris died, 8 or 10 years ago. Brilliant man, started the Institute for Creation Research. And his footnotes in the Bible are fabulous. I've worn out many of those Defender Study Bibles. So let's suppose the Gilgamesh epic was written down before Moses actually put. That still doesn't mean he's got it right. Just because you write it down first doesn't mean it's correct. 3 people can witness a car accident, and the first one to write it down may or may not have the correct story. So that is a myth that he is spreading, that because Gilgamesh wrote first, therefore he's got it right. Okay?
The myth of resurrections have been around since Osiris. You know, Osiris was one of the major Egyptian gods and used to be the kings in Egypt would be resurrected with Osiris when Osiris was resurrected. And then he goes to correlate that with Jesus and how it's nonsense, and that he's a myth just as much as Osiris.
Well, Satan has always tried to counterfeit what the God has done. The existence of a counterfeit does not prove the real thing doesn't exist. Quite the opposite. When you see a counterfeit, you know they must be counterfeiting something. They must be counterfeiting an original. So the original God of the universe resurrected. Jesus Christ's resurrection is absolutely true. It is true that there have been other religions, other doctrines, other false religions that teach something like this. The Egyptians believed there would be a resurrection, Osiris, etc. They had no evidence of it, no proof of it. Every one of the pharaohs that they buried and embalmed stayed dead. Jesus did not. His tomb is empty. You can go visit the tombs of the pharaohs if you'd like. They're still over there, and sometimes even the body, what's left of it, all shriveled up like a prune. So they might have believed Osiris' resurrection, but Jesus demonstrated it. No, his is not a myth. I disagree. I talk to him all the time. I happen to know him personally.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I'll be glad to introduce this fellow to him if he's interested. Anyway, next question.
Yep, that's good. That's right. Okay. Well, that's redundant. If you were born in the U.S., you probably, and you are religious, you believe in the Bible, Jesus. Okay, so if you were born in the U.S., you believe in the Bible and Jesus. If you were born in India, you would believe in Brahman and the Manifest of Ganesha. And if you were from the Islamic, you'd believe the Quran and Muhammad. It's kind of interesting that beliefs are dependent on where you are from.
Well, that's a good point. And if you go to a secular school, you might believe you came from Iraq. If you sit in his class, you might believe your great-great-great-great-grandpa was a monkey.
Right.
What is he proving? It's true that you can teach people to believe all kinds of crazy things. That doesn't mean there isn't an absolute truth. There is an absolute truth. And so it's a false analogy here. He's right that if you're born in India, you most likely will come up believing in one of the false gods, of which they have millions of them over there. But there's also plenty of missionaries teaching Christianity. There are people in America who follow the gods of India. There's people in America who follow Islam. There's people in Iraq that follow Jesus. I mean, what's the point? That doesn't mean one isn't true, because he's right that there is a cultural influence and a tendency to follow what your parents did. But anybody who's willing to seek truth, God will send somebody to tell them, to show them the truth. There have been millions of examples through history where God has sent somebody to answer a prayer from some pagan out in the jungle saying, God, show me who you are. And a missionary shows up or something eventually happens. There's a book called Eternity in Their Hearts by Don Richardson that deals with that. That's a classic. Excellent book. I would recommend people get that. Or Peace Child by the same author, Don Richardson, who was a missionary. Anyway, so he's partially right. Where you're born determines what you're, predetermined to be taught about. But that doesn't mean that one of them isn't true. That's where he goes off the tracks. Okay? Next question.
Okay. It's great that we live in a world where information is becoming more freely available, aka the internet, television, etc. And because that global access to information, we are seeing religion go down. Because people are learning that the myths and the lies they have been they're learning about the myths and the lies they have been taught.
He thinks it's because there is an increase in information and global access, internet, etc. That's why religion is going down.
Yeah.
Well, first I would question where he got his information that religion is going down. Well, let's assume it's true. That doesn't mean it's not true. Let's assume he's right that religion is declining or going down. Okay? That does not mean the internet is causing it. It might be just the prediction given in the Bible that it would happen in the last days. Many are going to fall away. For 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 1, 2, and 3. Matthew chapter 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, all predicted that. Jesus said in the last days, many are going to fall away. So maybe this is proof of the Bible. I don't think it's anything to do with the internet. I know the internet is a great tool to spread the gospel, and I think the people that use my ministry to do that quite effectively. They spread my videos all over the place via email. This right now we're using.
This call is from the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office.
And you're using a recorder, and you will post it on blog sites and websites, and people will learn about the truth and learn about the gospel through the internet. Mm-hmm. So, to me, that's a silly statement that he's saying because of global access. Now, that's not the cause and effect. There is he did not prove that they're tied together at all. In a logic class, he would get an F on that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Next statement.
Okay. The point is this. I like to use Steven Pinker's quote, "The acquisition of knowledge is hard. Our minds are prone to illusions, fallacies, and superstitions." That's exactly the point. It just like on the X-Files, Fox Mulder says, "I want to believe." That's my point. That's what we all have to remember. And as scientists, we have to remember that we want to believe, and we have to work hard to overcome that desire to believe.
Or you need to succumb to the the obvious, there's a designer. It's the painting on the tree story again. If you want to believe there is no painter, and you're determined to figure out a way how this painting grew out of this tree, well, you go ahead and knock yourself out. You can study the roots and the absorption and the minerals in the soil and see if the pigments are available, but it's obvious to anybody with half a brain and one eye. The painting is made by a painter. So I agree, acquisition of knowledge can be hard. I have tried to learn and study quite a few things during my lifetime, and have gotten several degrees, and I still try to learn and study. But that doesn't mean that people automatically want to believe in God because that's the easy way out. Quite the opposite. Well, tell him, why don't you try to live a Christian life among your friends and see how easy it is? You go serve God. Go stand on the street.
This call is from the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office.
Go pass out some gospel tracts at your university and see how easy it is. Just go try it.
Yeah.
No, the Christian life is not always easy. I am a testimony to that, that's for sure. Acquiring knowledge is hard, but it's wonderful, it's worth it. God's the origin of all knowledge and truth and wisdom. He wants us to acquire knowledge. What on earth is he saying there? I don't think it makes any sense. Not to me, anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. This might be redundant, but this is kind of to nail the coffin, last nail in the coffin here. Now, I don't have time to adequate justice to science. I don't have enough time to adequate justice to science. But science has continued. The evolution of science, getting rid of gods of the sun, the moon, the wind, the fire, etc., has continued to push God away. And then he goes on to give examples of Newton and Darwin, etc., talking about how they were great men of science and they didn't need God.
Darwin was a great man of science, is that what he's saying?
Yeah.
Darwin was a dropout. He dropped out of medical school. Darwin's dad was disappointed in him, sent him on a voyage, HMS Beagle, an unpaid natural assistant to the captain in those days had to stay separate from the men. So they usually hired somebody to go along with him just to be his friend, somebody to talk to the captain so he didn't have to fraternize with the men. So Darwin was the unpaid friend of the captain. And the captain was a Christian, Fitzroy. And he was a grouch in some way. He was not a model Christian, that's for sure. But Darwin was not a scientist in any shape or form. Darwin was a theologian, and a dud at that. And Darwin wrote a book called The Origin of Species, and he did not explain the origin of species. It's a dud. And he was a racist. I mean, study the man. So if he thinks Darwin is a hero we should look up to and worship, he needs to get some new heroes.
Yeah.
Darwin, I think, was a moron. He married his first cousin, thinking they'd have superior children. Take a look at what happened to his 10 children. Several serious problems from inbreeding.
Yeah.
No. And the evolution of science, now that might be a good way to use the word evolution. Science has evolved in that it has changed, and we have learned things. We're doing things better, hopefully better in some areas, worse in some. But yeah, if you want to use it for that meaning, I agree. The evolution of science might be a good phrase to use. But it doesn't push God away. How on earth could he say such a thing? There's no connection. You can learn all kinds of things and still believe in the designer, the creator. It doesn't hinder your research in any way. It actually enhances it. You know, if I'm taking a motorcycle apart, wow, I wonder why they did that. I wonder why they built that this way. I know there's a designer. I would like to figure out why. You can look at a machine and kind of get into the head of the designer a little bit. Oh, that's pretty cool. Look what he did and look why. Mm-hmm. So that's studying nature ought to draw us closer to God. Has nothing to do with pushing God away. Yep. That's ridiculous.
Yep.
As I've said many times, all the major branches of science were started by creationists and people who believed in God. Doesn't hinder anybody's science. And evolution has absolutely zero value for science. There isn't a medical doctor on the planet that thinks about evolution when he's doing surgery. He has to better know his anatomy.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with evolution. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
A couple guys waiting on the phone. Any more questions real quick? We'll use up this 15 anyway.
Okay, here we go. The divine spark that caused life in the first place is not so divine. Everything we know about biochemistry and the discovery of complex amino acid in space tells us it is quite likely that complex organic molecules, which life is based, either arose in space or developed on Earth. We don't know the origins of life, but it's plausible that you don't need a divine spark.
He is dreaming or lying or stupid. Going from molecules to life is a giant step. That's like jumping up and grabbing Mars. It is absolutely not possible. And anybody who should not be teaching other students, I agree. There is no known way that naturally molecules can come to life. But he just believes it happened. He's got incredible faith. And he's either lying or he's stupid. The molecules do not come alive. That's been covered adequately many times before.
And when it comes to the origin of the universe, we are coming remarkably close to the realization that you don't need a miracle either. And that's because our knowledge of the universe is changing. Not because we want to get rid of God, but because when we learn more, the more we learn, the less we need anything outside the laws of physics and chemistry and biology.
Okay, the guy is confusing the origin of the universe with the operation of the universe. It is true that we can understand quite a few things about the operation of this universe via the laws of gravity, centrifugal force, inertia, etc. But that has nothing to do with the origin of it. I can understand the operation of a car or a watch or any complex machine, but that does not explain the origin. They are two radically different things, and so that is just silly. The fact that we are finally understanding how it operates, okay, but that ought to make you admire the guy who created it and designed it. You know, if I could explain how a car works, and I think I could, I have a real good understanding of auto mechanics, okay, that doesn't take away the need for a designer. So that's ridiculous to think that science is now grasping the operational principles, mechanics, etc., and therefore there's no designer. That is just fatally flawed logic. Okay?
Okay. Science does more than that, and I'm assuming that is religion. Science does more than that. It doesn't just tell us about the world. It makes the world a better place. It gets rid of vile, awful, immoral works like the Bible. The worldview that I would argue that guides most of you in this room today, including those of the people with the faith and those with education. Well, let's just stick with that. It doesn't do the science does more than that. It just doesn't tell us about the world. It makes the world a better place. It gets rid of the vile, awful, immoral works like the Bible.
He thinks the Bible is vile, awful, and immoral?
Yep.
Wow. I just don't know if I can help a guy like that. I'll try. But no, science doesn't, I don't know of anything in the Bible that has been disproven by science. If he has a specific, I'd like to see it. Everything, the Bible is not a science book. It doesn't tell you how to build a computer, I understand. But when it touches on any field of science, it is exactly correct. It's 100% accurate. From biology, anatomy, every field of science. I'd like to see anything that is scientifically incorrect in the Bible. Be specific. Send me your best 2 or 3, and let's talk about them. But to just make a generic statement like that is crazy. No, show me something specific. I'd like to see that. I've studied the Bible for many years, and I believe it is absolutely scientifically, historically, mathematically, in every way, 100% accurate. I don't know of any problems. I know that in our science textbooks, I can show you all kinds of inaccuracies and errors and problems if he wants to. And they use the word science like it's some kind of magic word, you know, like, whoa, that's it. Throw this word out there. Poof. Oh, wow, science. Oh, everybody bow down, you know?
Yeah.
No, science means knowledge. So what do we know? Knowledge. That's all the word means, knowledge. What do we know about the science of, say, the earth science, or physical science, you know, or there's all kinds of biological science. There's all kinds of sciences where we've gathered information for decades or centuries or millennia on various topics, and we're learning. if I say we, meaning mankind, at least some of them are learning how to organize and utilize this knowledge. But it doesn't at all get rid of God. Understanding the operation of a car does not get rid of the designer. It actually should make you appreciate and say, wow, the guy was pretty smart. Look, he thought of that. Amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I agree the same thing. Like somebody says, like I'm a scientist, and it's like, okay, I ran into people like that at the university all the time, and it was like, at first it's just like it's silly. They say it like they're so much better than everybody, So.
Well, maybe next time someone says that, you should say, "I'm sorry to hear about that. That can be fixed."
Okay, here we go.
Take a little wind out of it.
Yeah.
Take some wind out of their sails, huh?
Yeah. And it's so funny that I went to a Catholic university, and most of them were all atheists. The people I went to school with that were teaching. I don't know how you do that, but whatever. By stripping ecclesiastical authority of its credibility on factual matters, which we have done, there's no doubt on the certainties of morality. Because now we think women are equal to men. We don't hate gays, and all the stupid myths that are permeated by various religions.
Okay, what's that first sentence again?
By stripping ecclesiastical authority of its credibility in factual matters, they can now say women are equal, we don't hate gays, etc.
Okay, hang on. By stripping ecclesiastical authority of its factual matters. Now, I don't know who he's talking about and who he considers to be an ecclesiastical authority. Of course, there are plenty of frauds. Like you mentioned, you went to a Catholic university. Mm-hmm. I would be a long ways from a Catholic. So I think you can look at various religions and various people and find loads of errors. That's not a problem. But I'm talking about the book, the Bible. I don't know that there's been any factual authority taken away. The Bible teaches, for instance, that the creation was...
This call is from the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office.
In 6 literal 24-hour days. That's the only way it would work, where you have plants breathing in CO2 and giving off oxygen, and animals breathing in the oxygen and giving off the CO2. They're reciprocating the gases. They have to be created within a few days of each other. And you have literally millions, if not billions or trillions, of symbiotic relationships where certain animals or plants require certain other plants or animals to survive. They're designed for each other. They have to be created within a day or two of each other. It's just exactly what the Bible says. Now, the religion of evolution says they slowly work their way into this symbiotic relationship. There are no examples of that. None. That's not science. That's a religion people choose to believe in. Yeah. All we ever see are things that work. The tire did not slowly evolve to fit the rim. The rim and the tire have to be specifically designed to be the right size and to fit together. They're two separate units, but where they mesh together or doesn't work. It leaks or goes flat or doesn't fit. So I think that ecclesiastical authority, i.e. some of the people representing certain religions, certainly have been proven wrong, fraudulent, liars, etc. over the centuries, and there's a bunch of them alive today, some on TV. Send me $20 and I'll heal you of your poverty. And I heard a guy say that once. I said, you've got to be kidding. And people probably did it. Probably sent him $20. Okay. But as far as the book, that's what I want to deal with. I'd like to see some errors in the Bible, the King James Bible. Show me something that is scientifically or mathematically incorrect. And I don't think he'll be able to do that. Yeah. If he wants to see errors in his textbook, send me a copy of his book and I'll point out some. Women are not equal to men. Women can have babies. Men cannot. They're not equal. They're different. Now, hello, Anatomy 101. Yeah. They're different. And God made them different. Doesn't mean one's better than the other. They're just different. Okay, to add just a little to add just a little more to his last comment, that women are not equal to men. They're not equal physically. Almost as a general rule, men are taller than women. As a general rule, they weigh more. They're stronger. Intellectually, they're probably the same. They can both learn. But even their brain thinks differently. I don't think most women want to be men, and most men don't want to be women. That's just kind of abnormal. So where does he get this idea that they're equal? I'm very glad my wife and I are not equal. She's different than me. We have different strengths and weaknesses, and we mesh together and make a wonderful team. But it's not because we're equal. That is dumb.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the God we need to bury in Deuteronomy. He said, "Kill all men and women." He told the Israelites to conquer a city, and the men did conquer that city and killed women and children, and livestock, and seized them. Now we live in a world where you can't preach genocide. In the modern world and the non-fundamentalist world, where you in the modern world and the non-fundamentalist world where you can't preach genocide anymore because we buried God. You can't go around drowning people's babies in the bathtub. Otherwise, we put you in a mental institution.
Okay, we went over this a little bit before. Suppose you came across an island and you wanted to inhabit this island, but there were rats or mice on this island that were infected with horrible diseases that if it gets into the human population, it's going to wipe everybody out. So here you got these rats and mice on this island, and the fleas and the bacteria and everything that goes with it, and you got a whole culture of a seriously infected with a deadly disease island. Would you go in there, surround the island, fumigate it, and kill everything, and then move in after it's clean? Of course you would. You wouldn't want to let one baby mouse survive because it's going to have that disease and spread it into the population. They do that. That's what bacterial organisms do. They kill every single bacteria, even the little babies. That's normal. That's fine. And I don't think he knows, nor does anybody know exactly why God said to do all that. God may have had a very good reason.
Yeah.
Hang on one second.
Okay.
Hey, Lance, turn my razor, and we get a razor once a week here. It's
okay.
as far as God told them to wipe out the civilization in that city. That is exactly correct. Now, did he have a reason for that we may or may not know? Well, I'm going to choose the option of trusting God rather than doubting God and say, yes, he probably did. And it may have been something as simple as these people we know from historical finds, archaeological finds, they were very actively involved in sex with animals, which introduces all kinds of diseases. So maybe God in his wisdom was trying to save humanity from a serious problem. Like the example when it was first discovered that 50 people had AIDS, would it have been smarter for humanity to isolate them, quarantine them, or even execute them to save that from spreading to now how many people have died from this? It's math 101, of course. It's wiser to get rid of 50 than it is like when we bombed Hiroshima. Okay, they killed 100,000 people, babies and everything in the city. But it saved millions of people that would have died had we tried to invade Japan. They looked at this carefully and said, we're going to have to sacrifice these two cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, to save millions, if not tens of millions of lives. Were they right to do that? I think even 60, 70 years later, we look back and say, it wasn't a good decision, but yes, it had to be done. It was right. So I think when we see all the facts, we'll say, God, you were right to tell the people to do what you told them to do. Okay, next question.
Okay. So he's rambling off about this one subject and trying to use this. So anyway, he goes on to talk about how the age-old question, what keeps the nucleus together? Okay, you know what? Let's do this. I'm going to have you answer it, and then I'll give you his response. What holds a nucleus together?
Well, there have been several theories about that. Obviously, the nucleus of every atom, as far as we know, and we don't know real far into this field, but the nucleus of every every atom is protons and neutrons. The protons are positively charged, so you would think they would all repel each other, like all positive charges repel. Mm-hmm. What holds the nucleus together is an age-old question that I'm not aware of anybody coming up with a complete answer. They've got a lot of theories, gluons and quarks and all. Maybe it is. I don't think we know. If he knows, I'd like to hear what he says. I'm open for an answer, but the Bible says in Colossians that the Lord holds all things together. Whether that's referring to the atoms, I don't know. Maybe. Go ahead. Let's hear what he says on it.
Okay. Yeah, you're going to find this interesting. We understand exactly what holds... Okay. We understand exactly what holds the neutron and proton together. The strong force.
Well, that answers it. You gotta be kidding.
Yeah, I know.
That's his answer, huh? Yeah. Wow. Well, I don't think I can help the guy I think I can't help him anymore on that one. So if he's satisfied with that answer, go ahead. Yeah. And he gets upset with Christians. He gets upset with Christians saying God did it, because he wants to use science to look further than just God did it, and yet he would give an answer like that? Yeah. He needs to go look in the mirror.
I know.
Okay, go ahead.
He's watched a lot of Star Wars films, that's for sure.
The strong force, yep. Give me a jar of that strong force, please. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, then he goes on to say, excuse me, then he goes on to say that that's the reason why Richard Dawkins won't debate you or this Dr. Craig at the moment. Then he goes on a tirade that's why we can't debate you guys, because you're not scientists. Let me move on here. I'll find another question here.
Oh, no. Hold on a minute. Okay. If in his definition of scientist, you have to believe you came from a rock and the nucleus is held together by the strong force, if that's what makes a scientist in his mind, I am very glad to not be one. Yeah. However, I think a scientist is a person who studies science, which is the accumulation of knowledge that man has gathered over the millennia, and I am certainly a scientist. So I'm sorry, I disagree. But if he wants to call me, he can call me anything he wants. Let's get to the issue. What evidence does he or anybody have that any animal or plant has ever produced anything other than its kind? What evidence does he have? What scientific evidence can he show me, demonstrate in a lab? What evidence does he have for the evolution theory above minor variations within the kind? I would like to see it. Very badly, I'd like to see it. So tell him, let's hear it. We're talking about it, just show me.